This demonstration is to show sample 3 of the Family Consumer FACS Exploration sewing samples. We are going to be using the same square of fabric that we used for sample 1 and sample 2. Sample 1 was serging each edge, sample 2 was practicing different seam allowances and pivoting at the corners. So sample 3 is to get to know our machine a little bit. Each stitch here tells you exactly what adjustments need to be made on your machine. So we are going to start with stitch A. Stitch A says that we're doing button number 1. We are not making any adjustments to the machine. This is simply just to do a straight stitch. We are going to just be sewing within the inside square that we have sewn with our 5/8 inch seam allowance. We're going to sew 1 or 2 stitches, we're going to back stitch 1 or 2 stitches, and we're just going to work our way across. This is simply just to practice a couple of stitches. Back stitch when you get to the other side, pull your fabric out, trim off your threads, and there's our straight stitch. Our second stitch, which is stitch B, is to practice a basting stitch. We are going to use our stitch length buttons. These are our stitch width, hence the zigzag sign, and our stitch length. We want to adjust our stitch length, which if you're watching right here on the screen, moves that bar all the way to the top. So we want a stitch length of 5. Parallel to where we sewed the first stitch, we are going to sew the second stitch. We are going to sew 1 or 2 stitches and back stitch 1 or 2. A basting stitch is a really, really long stitch. When we get to the other side, we're going to back stitch 1 or 2 stitches. Pull our threads out and trim. You can literally see the difference in the size of the stitch here in comparison to the size of the stitch there. Okay, so a basting stitch is just a long temporary stitch. Stitch numbers or letter C is a zigzag stitch. We are going to put our fabric underneath our presser foot and we are going to make some adjustments. We want to take our stitch length back down to 2.5, right where we started at. And we want to adjust our stitch width, our zigzag, to a 4. So this is going to be the bar going across the top right here. We're going to move it all the way over to a 4. Then we're ready to stitch. We're going to sew 1 or 2 stitches, back stitch 1 or 2. The machine's going to do the work. All your hands are doing is guiding the fabric across. Back stitch when you get to the other side, needle up, and we've got ourselves a nice zigzag. Stitch 4, which is stitch D, is a decorative stitch. So we're going to stick our fabric right underneath our presser foot, and it says we are going to do stitch number 7. This is your blanket stitch. So we push that button and it automatically makes all the changes for us. These are smart machines. Once again, you're going to sew 1 or 2 stitches, you're going to back stitch 1 or 2 stitches. Now remember, this is a blanket stitch, so the needle's going to be going every which direction. Don't help it. Let the machine do the work. All your hands are doing is guiding the fabric. You can go as fast or as slow as you want. I recommend that you keep a consistent speed. When you get to the other side, back stitch 2 or 3 stitches, and here's your blanket stitch. Our last stitch, which is stitch E, is to, and let's just put our fabric underneath our presser foot, is stitch 9. So you're going to push this button right here and it's automatically going to make all of the changes your machine needs, and we're going to work our way across. 1 or 2 stitches, back stitch 1 or 2 stitches. I would recommend keeping a slow, consistent speed for this stitch. If you vary your speed and go fast and slow, it's not going to look as good as if you keep a consistent speed working all the way across. Remember, the machine does the work. Your hands are just there to guide the fabric. As you approach the other side, you're going to back stitch 2 or 3 stitches and you're going to trim your threads. Now, you're going to want to trim all of these threads or your teacher is going to dock you points. You want to get rid of those so that your sample is nice and clean without any thread tails on both the top and the bottom. But these are our 5 stitches and you are done with your sewing samples.